Buddy, I'd like to call the Municipal Planning Commission meeting to order on December 18th at 10 a.m. And as you have in front of us, the agenda, are there any additions to the agenda? Any from the board? Any from staff?
I'm from staff.
Okay. Can I get a motion?
I'll move the agenda as presented.
Thank you. Questions, concerns? Seeing none. All those in favor? All those there, carried. Minutes, approval, November the 27th meeting, distributed, had a chance to look. I'll take Mr. Gender.
As presented, please.
No errors or omissions. All those in favor? That's carried, thank you. And nothing arising from said minutes, so we're going to move right into number 5, into introductions. Okay, and we'll start with Michelle.
Michelle Hoover, Legislative Assistant.
Ernie Gender, board member. Good morning. Paul McKay, board member.
Larry Clark, board member. Justin Stevens, good morning.
Les Stulberg, board member.
James Nyberg, Chair of the Municipal Planning Commission.
Greg Teal, Director of Planning and Development. Andrew Brishick, Director of Municipal Services.
Okay, and we'll go down in that corner first, start off.
Fred downstairs, farmer out in the area that you're dealing with.
Okay,
Kevin Heemstra. Sammy from Tiffany.
Mark Lackey with Trimble Engineering, representing fire.
Lori Rule, resident of the county.
Mackenzie Higgins, Passion Associates. Brooke Chalman, Fishing Associates. Greg Baden, BECL Associates. Ryan Allen, Lex Line.
thank you and welcome everybody. Okay, we're going to go straight into, I think, what everybody's here for, Development 6.1. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what I intend to do is briefly just walk through the report. I won't read it line by line, but just try to highlight some of the major things. So it may take a little bit longer than our usual reports. I do want to point out a process item for the panel. Just remind you that as a group, you have the prerogative to deliberate in camera, if you so choose, after you've heard the presentations for myself and any other persons that need to speak, and after you've also had questions of anyone present that wants to speak to the item of clarification. After that, if you choose to go in camera, it's only administration that can join you. With that, Mr. Chair, the application is located in the area west of 835 and just south of Township Road 37-0. It's on an existing oil and gas lease. All the way to the operator is Ember, I believe. And the proposal is to add a power generation site composed of 9 generators and containers with a generation capacity of about 9.9 megawatts and 9 CCAN containers containing around 300 computers each for the purposes of Bitcoin mining or data processing. The application contains those 2 primary uses, and due to jurisdictional issues, how we deal with them are just slightly different. So we share jurisdiction on the power generation component, which is a permitted use within the agricultural district. And then we have sole jurisdiction on the discretionary use, which is the Bitcoin or data processing component. So just bear that in mind when we're looking at the evaluation of the issues and the final outcome. I'll probably just scroll down to page 11, please, Andrew. We'll take a look at the site line. So this overlay sketch shows an existing compressor site. So that's the large kind of grayish box in the middle. Township Road 37-0 is to the north. It's approximately 200 meters or at max into the property, into the quarter section. The area outlined in green is the area that was the subject of this particular application, which would be a sublease on that location. The white 9 items outside on the north side and the south side are the containers for the Bitcoin mining, and the kind of gold color items that are through the middle are the 9 generator locations. There is an error in some of the references, just so you mind. I got a little mixed up with my compass. This is the southwest corner of the compressor site, not the southeast. So if you've seen that in some of the photos references, that was a mistake in the actual report. If you can scroll on a little bit more, Andrew. So the next photo, same page, still shows the compressor site a little bit more context. Again, 37-0, just making the top of the page, the lease site being the gray box. And then what you're also seeing is from our GIS is the distance measures to some of the nearest residences within the area. So there is, some of them are within 1,000 meters, more or less, from the edge of the site. Depends if you measure from the compressor site, from the middle, it'll be slightly different. But for the purposes of our regulations that apply to this data processing site, we do have at least one house that's within the 1,200 meters, which I'll try to speak to a little bit later through the report. The application, how it stacks up against the land use bylaw, I won't bother with the pictures of the appearance. Mr. Chair, we can come back to those if there's any questions. Same with the site photos. We'll just quickly go over those. And again, if there's questions, we can come back and take a look at those. In terms of the analysis against the land use bylaw, the first use, the power generation, it's a very lengthy definition that you can see on page 15 for public and private road or utilities. So we lump a whole bunch of things into this. So this particular use does meet the private utility definition for the purpose of a generation of electric power. So staff are comfortable that the proposal does meet the use that's allowed in the districts that permit it and meets our definition of bylaw for that purpose. We scroll further down, I did mention the jurisdictional issue with the Alberta Utility Commission. So given that it's over 1 megawatt of generation, an AUC approval was also required. The applicant obtained that in October 7. It's attached to your package. I attached that specifically to identify the distinction between their approval on the power side versus our jurisdiction on the Bitcoin. So if you take a look on that, in that approval letter on the second page, I believe item 9, clearly identifies that the Bitcoin is not subject to AUC's joint jurisdiction. So we have to be cautious of the fact that, and I've given the quotes from the MGA, that if the AUC has approved a power plant, we're approving a power plant effectively. Our decision cannot override those. And same with any conditions that we oppose. We can't impose conditions that would rise to the point where the applicant can't satisfy the AUC condition or requirement. So just to bear in mind, that's the big thing that separates the two uses in terms of jurisdiction. One's shared and one's not. On the Bitcoin, the data processing component, we do call that formally a data processing center in our land use bylaw, and the definition you can find on page 16. So that's any facility. It's not just about CCAN containers. That ranges from a server room, a big server complex, could be a building. In this case, it is containers with computers for the purposes of cryptocurrency generation or just processing data. We do in our land use bylaw have some extra rules that go with that particular use. You can also find those at the bottom of page 16. And one of those is that distance to the nearest house, 1,200 meters, which automatically would trigger a noise impact assessment as part of the consideration. And depending on the results of that noise impact assessment, that setback may be reduced. And I'll speak to that a little bit more as we come to the topic of noise. Scrolling further on, I do have to point out in our LUV analysis, we referenced the wrong noise levels for some of the receptors. The ones that are labeled R1, R02, and R03, those are the existing dwellings. So in the initial cut, when we first were discussing things with the applicant, they had a different noise assessment using louder generators. And this assessment is based on the second noise assessment that uses a quieter set of generators to meet our expectations largely on noise that the administration they communicated to the applicant. So there's a table later on in the report that will come up that is a more current material. I'm sure the gentleman from patching can do a way better job than I am explaining all the noise information and issues. But just to point out that the noise issue, I defer to the table instead of what you see in the paragraph on page 17. And the noise for the existing houses and some of our additional impact on adjacent properties does meet the 40 decibel level that's historically been used by AER and AUC as the benchmark for noise in a quiet rural setting at nighttime. And we are using the nighttime specifically because we don't expect this use to be kind of a throttle up during the day and then dial it back during the night. Other uses do have the ability of going up to 55 decibels in the daytime, but we do have a different expectation for nighttime, and that's the benchmark that's been used for this particular use. We don't have any specific setbacks, so we've tried to apply our general setbacks for dwellings, and given the location of the lease area pretty deep into the quarter section, we don't have any concerns with setback distances from that perspective. Given the interest in the application, this was circulated out to landowners within a mile area. It was circulated. Postal strike certainly didn't help that part, so we did our best trying to get it out to people where we knew that they may not have lived on the quarter section that's in this area, but they live further afield, and we could find their house and get something delivered off to them. We were fortunate to get our hands on some emails to get that out. Unfortunately, Mr. Chair, there's one or two that we just couldn't do anything for. We hosted a Zoom session on December 5th where anyone who was interested was welcome to join us, and the applicant and have their questions addressed by the applicant and share their thoughts on the application. That is largely paraphrased in the section that comes directly below that, and you also have attached your report 2 letters that came in from landowners, and some of their concerns are also summarized in those, although some of them are here today and may want to speak directly to their own points, Mr. Chair. And some of those items I will try to touch on and do more further analysis going through the rest of the report, which is our next section. So first up, the big topic, or a big topic, is the impact of noise. And from a planning perspective, the department relies on the process that's used by AER and AUC, those provincial rules that have been established for quite a few years about how to do a noise assessment and what the benchmark should be. But there's a little bit of a difference in terms of our interpretation of the results. So when you see references to R01, R02, and R03, those are references to existing dwellings that are on the ground at the time that they're doing the assessment, which is important from a planning perspective. But we also have an interest in, if you're the adjacent property owner and you may be within 1,000 meters or of the distance, you haven't built a house yet, what kind of nuisance would your undeveloped, yet to be developed property be expected to experience? So we have a little bit different in how we would apply the results. And that's why you're going to see, when we go to the drawing on page 21, I believe, which is the post, what I've labeled after. So this is the information for the very colorful ring is drawn from the patching report. And county staff have superimposed the quarter section lines on there for reference, so we can see the relationship to property boundaries. And you see a number of items that are labeled Rec-A, Rec-H, Rec-G. Those are hypothetical building locations for undeveloped portions that are around the site. And the question that was put to the applicant was, could you demonstrate to us that that 40 decibel area noise level can be satisfied and still leave enough space on those adjacent properties for them to place a house at some future date without having to endure more than 40 decibels noise during the day or during the night. And that was a task that was given, and basically they've come back and demonstrated that at a distance of 646 meters, you get, for most part, to the outer edge of that yellow band. So the outer edge is the 40 decibel mark. So if you're past that and you're going into the various green shades, which sometimes are difficult to distinguish, you're below the 40 mark. If you're going closer to the source, that more intense, you're getting a higher noise impact. The canary for this one was where you see Rec-A. That is to the northeast of the site. That's an undeveloped, was at one point developed acreage that's been taken out of the quarter section, and it has a rural address sign, which we only give where there's a house, but currently there is no dwelling on the property. So when we consider our setbacks and where that dwelling will be placed, that's how we arrived at the 646 meter distance measure. And anything greater than that probably would have eliminated that ability to place a house on there without enduring that 40 decibel level of noise. So that gives us a good benchmark to then evaluate what's happening with the other quarter sections all the way around. And our assessment is while there will be an increase in noise, landowners may or may not notice it depending on how good your hearing is and ears are. There's still enough land left elsewhere on the larger blocks of land to place a house and be beyond that 40 decibel ring. So from a planning perspective, we're comfortable that that issue of undue influence or nuisance on the adjacent property can be managed, and provided the quieter generators that are in the second noise assessment are the ones that go on the site, and that the actual real world assessment later on proves the modeling results that we're looking at on the page. That said, Mr. Chair, I know I'll point out that some of the landowner letters that we have many questions about the type of analysis and what's happening in the numbers in the background. Some of which I'll tell you right now, I'm not a acoustical engineer, which is why we do rely on acoustical engineers to do these kind of reports. Also, I point out that given the nature of digital signatures that are attached to PDFs, the version that's in your MPC report, the engineering stamps and signatures and permit to practice, that kind of gets stripped out. But we are relying on evidence from a professional engineering document that's been reviewed by at least 3 practicing members.
Okay.
Moving on to other issues, I got some more. Onto page 22, road access to the site is 37-0. It is probably fair to say this section of 37-0 is not our greatest, flattest, safest section of road in the county. And once you're past the Ember site going to the west, it deteriorates even more from there. So we were able to visit the site in August when we were initially still talking to the applicant. So if you're wondering why there's some in the winter and some in the summer, that's why you're seeing some of the differences. In the first photo, you can see that some of the hummocky nature of the road. So the road surface starts out pretty decent coming off 835, but it does narrow by about 1.5 miles in, and in some cases drops to about a 5-meter width. And unfortunately, that's blended with a series of hummocky blind crests that if there's an opposing vehicle coming up the side and you're going up the other, you would not see them, and vice versa. So there's makes it a little bit dicey for driving in that respect. The traffic addition from the use, once it's up and operating, is projected to be an additional 2 to 4 vehicles a day. That's in addition to the Ember staff that are already going to the site on a daily basis and any other local traffic that's in the area. That is also distinctive from the construction-related traffic, which is going to be another issue that needs to be looked at. It's 9 containers shipments, 9 generator shipments, heavy equipment movements, and the unknown number of loads out for any waste material from excavation and loads in of gravel to build up a suitable path. So staff have recommended that we use 2 tools on this one. First is our typical road use agreement, which does a fairly decent job on issues of dust and coordination and damage to our roads and that sort of thing. But we probably have to boost that with what we're calling a traffic safety plan to deal with the movement of those kind of equipment up and down that road. It's almost like a rig move, so it'd be more controlled and measured. May involve flag people, advance notice given out to households and pilot vehicles and staging areas to manage the number of vehicle traffic, construction-related traffic up and down this particular segment of road. As the road authority, there's also some room for us to improve our signage, given the nature of the road, for more cautionary signs and possibly look at speed. Moving on to the next item, visual impacts on adjacent area properties has been raised as an issue and certainly something we'll look at. This one is a little bit relative, given that it's going on a compressor station site, which has a very industrial look to begin with. And we're adding generators in enclosures, and we're adding C-cans containing computers. So right away, the benchmark is that of an industrial site in terms of aesthetics from a planning perspective. Also, given the lay of the land and the vegetation, it's actually very difficult to see into the compressor site from 37-0, which is the closest public roadway, and adjacent properties. You may or may not be able to get a perspective or view if you go to the very back. So from that perspective, planning staff don't have concerns about the visual impacts. Wildlife impacts and air quality, that's going on to page 24. There were 2 additional reports that are available from the applicant. One dealt specifically with the wildlife impact as part of a broader environmental impact assessment. And the conclusion has been put in your report that the wildlife may be encouraged. The additional noise will probably push them a little further away from the compressor site. But in terms of their ability to survive and still be in the area, there's ample habitat still. So it's not to say that their patterns won't change. It's just the patterns will change to the point where they are not able to live and be in the area. And that's the conclusion that you're seeing about no negative adverse impacts in the first paragraph. On the issue of air quality, the emission that's of concern from the generators is a nitrogen dioxide, especially if it drops down to ground level. So that has been assessed against the Alberta ambient air quality objectives. And you see the 2 conclusions that if there is a rain cap or not a rain cap, you can meet the quality, the Alberta standards. Just the stack difference is probably a 1 meter difference in height, depending on whether or not the emissions are able to go straight up versus being deflected down by a rain cap. Moving on to the bottom of page 24 with some questions and concerns about security issues, largely due to what we're experiencing in rural Alberta about theft, and especially around industrial sites that may or may not contain copper or weapons that are tools that are easy to pawn. So looking at that from kind of a crime prevention through environmental design perspective and looking at the advice from the RCMP, that's where you see some of the points that are in the report. And some of these items are already in place on the site for the Ember activities and can be expanded to encompass the proposed use. So that does include warning signs and let people know that it's monitored. It does include staff that come in to report incidents, which I hope they do, so the detachment has some record of what's going on. Perimeter fencing, although the barbed wire should be moved up to chain link on the south side in the southwest corner. Lockable secure areas are available on the sites. And I think I've already mentioned the occasional staff visiting. The one thing that's not readily available when you visit the site is, and maybe an option for the applicant, is to laser engrave items, more for recovery, but maybe a deterrent. So from a planning perspective, probably hardening up, making it more difficult for thieves is a reasonable approach. Going to the extent of saying you can't have it because it attracts thieves is a little bit more of a difficult argument to make from a planning perspective. Stormwater management does have to be addressed. There is an existing on-site stormwater management pond that deals with the gravel pad that is there now. And the gravel pad will be expanded to accommodate this use. And so the grading of that does have to direct that stormwater to that facility up in the northwest corner. And also there's a question that I'll come to in the proposed conditions to attach to the development permit, dealing with confirmation from an engineer that the existing pond has capacity or may have to be expanded. Fire hazard is raised as an issue, and looking at this from an issue of, say, fire smart. Certainly if you have a bunch of containers that have electricity and that generate a lot of heat, the risk is there for malfunction, that there could be a spread if it gets into the grass and then gets into the trees, especially with the dry conditions we've had in our area over the last several years. So there is measures to deal with this, and some of that you can see on the air photo a bit. Back up on the previous page is the concept of a buffer. Part of that could be the gravel within the compound, and part of it could also be making sure that the vegetation is cleared back and that only well manicured mowed grass is the initial buffer. So you see that a little bit on the right hand side of that photo, the east side of the compressor site, beyond the fence line, which would be at the gray, where the gray box is. And that's the approach that we're recommending, that a buffer be maintained or created and maintained to deal with that potential risk of fire spread. So, Mr. Chair, that takes us to the alternatives that are available in the Municipal Planning Commission. And I do want to quickly walk through the conditions that we've put before the Commission to consider attached to the development permit. So just to remind the Commission that they have the option of approving with staff conditions or modifying those conditions or going through a partial or a full refusal. And again, I'll remind you of the prerogative of deliberating in camera after you've had a chance to hear from others. So jumping down to page 98, ultimately the recommendation from staff is to approve the proposed development subject to a series of conditions. I just briefly want to walk through some of those. If we can scroll a little bit further down on the page, Andrew. So the first up is that number one, I know it seems kind of obvious at times, but just for clarity, we're expecting the development to be carried out based on the plans and reports that we've seen, in addition to any of the conditions that follow. The data processing center itself is a use that our land use bylaw is subject to only a 5-year life of a permit. After that, the applicant will have to come back in and seek renewal of that. The power generators don't face a 5-year limit, and that's why you see a distinct or a specific condition talking about the data processing use. If MPC approves it as of today's date, then that 5 years will be up December 18th, 2029. Number 3 is specific to make sure that we're using the promised set of types of generators. And very importantly is the sound rating of 75 decibels at 7 meters from the base compared to the previous 85 from the other generator that was proposed. If we could scroll down, please, Andrew. Number 4, same with the Bitcoin mining, it's 40 with the noise rating. So if you suddenly replace it with a different container that has a different noise rating, that's not what was approved. And number 5 deals with follow-up on noise and trying to prove up the model results with real world experience once it's in full operation. So first up, there may be a lag from approval to the point when things are up and operating, and we're interested in operational conditions once it's full up and operating. So there's that, first you have to get to that point, notify the development officer, and then within a year, in this condition, what we're expecting is someone similar to the noise study that's been done by Patching Associates, goes out in the field, does actual measurement, and says and demonstrates to the development officer how those results compare against the modeling results. And if they're lower, great. If they're higher, then we need to move on and talk about mitigation. The second follow-up on the noise issue would be the 5-year renewal. That new application coming in will most likely lead to planning staff asking yet again for all the noise questions to determine whether or not a subsequent 5-year approval should be granted. Number 6 deals with the grading and that stormwater management issue that I was mentioning. And again, it's about getting the final details nailed down and demonstrating from a professional engineer that we'll get to the pond and that there's space in the pond to deal with the runoff. We scroll down a little bit more, Andrew, please. Yep, just scroll a little bit, 7 at the top, and we should get all of 11 on there. Okay, so 7 deals with the issue of the fire safety buffer, and that's making sure that it actually extends out that 50 feet. 8 deals with the replacement of barbed wire with a chain link fence around the perimeter. 9 deals with the issue of don't let, we're not sure if computers will come in individual boxes or what kind of waste, but like any construction project, if there is shipping materials or waste, that expectation is that it's maintained and properly disposed of and not left to blow across the neighbors' fields. Number 10 is our condition for our typical road use agreement. So that's prior to moving in and setting up. And number 11 is the traffic safety plan items that would augment the road plan that I mentioned, and some of the items that we'd be looking at to be covered off and adequately addressed in that are itemized there. So Mr. Chair, that's the formal presentation from administration, and I'd be happy to field any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Very in-depth. Questions, board members? Mr. Gender.
This noise assessment evaluation, like was there over a particular day, time? I'm just kind of wondering.
Actually, I'm probably going to rely on the gentleman that did the report to that question, Mr. Chair, if they're willing to, and I'm not sure if the applicant wants to do it first or not.
Okay. Who's going to take that one? There's lots of names out there and lots of who. Okay, if you'd speak at the mic, if you would. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. Can I ask to repeat it again, if you don't mind?
The noise assessment, at what date, time, particularly over duration? The reason I'm asking, okay, I live within about 100 feet of the Highway 12. There are days that I don't hear them. There are days that it actually feels as though they're coming right in front of my house. So like there's quite a discretion in there. So if you're going to say it's going to take in within, say like a certain distance, there's going to be certain days that it is not going to be exactly the same amount.
I understand. Thank you. So we make our assessments for the nighttime, basically, because the nighttime regulations are more stringent. So we assume that the equipment runs 24 hours consistently, and we provide the results for the nighttime, which is regulated as 40 dBA limit as the permissible sound level. Does that address your question?
You assume that it's going to be, say, like at a certain time in there. Okay, but I have found that it doesn't matter whether it's day or night, but in front of our own place, it really varies, and I don't know why. I don't know whether it's a density of the air. I have no clue why. But I would hate like to see something like this. Okay, if you base it on within a certain distance, and the closest neighbor is going to be hearing it different times. I find that some of these neighbors, they move into these areas of where it's very discreet, very quiet. Sometimes when you say like to have a definition of quiet, you can't really explain it. So I don't want to see this imposed onto residents within the area, and all of a sudden it's going to be changing their lifestyle.
Yep. How we approach these kinds of assessments is we assume like a consistent operation, excluding the emergency or testing or repair and maintenance operations. So this assumes that the equipment runs consistently 24 hours with the predetermined technical conditions. That's how we make our assessments.
Thank you.
Mr. Clark and then Mr. Steven.
I've got a question that's probably back to the technical folks too. I just am really, when I looked at this application, really struggling why there'd be 9 power generation units versus 1 with a backup possibly. Having worked with a lot of rotating equipment in the past, you say you're going to run 24 hours, summertime operation with these units could be very difficult. When you calculate your noise surveys, that'll be with all your doors on every unit shut. And operators typically will do whatever they can to keep rotating equipment running in the summertime. And that will be doors open, that changes everything. And typically, a lot of our folks may not have air conditioning in their houses, and that's the hottest days of the year. So therefore, every window will be open in their house at night when they're trying to sleep. And that's when you get your biggest noise complaints. So one unit in itself, you look at a site, you can start to face coolers and pieces of equipment different directions. But I do agree with Councillor Gender in the fact that I'm almost a half a mile off of Highway 12, and there's days that it sounds like they're driving right through my yard, and I don't know if it's wind, I don't know if it's pressure systems, but the noise definitely, and that can be with your windows shut even in the wintertime. It sounds the noise is really picked up. Most rural residents have chosen not to live along Crowchild Trail or Deerfoot Trail, so peace and quiet and nuisance is at forefront with people. So I just am really curious in how you plan on keeping 8 or 9 units running in the summertime when we're 35 above.
So I will let your group decide who out of your group is best qualified, because I'll be honest, I've got some names, but I'm not sure who's the most qualified to answer that.
Morning, gentlemen.
And just for the record, maybe state your name again, because we're.
Absolutely. My name is Mark Lackey. I'm with Trimble Engineering. I don't know if we'll be able to, in great depth, answer the question of 10 megawatts versus 9 individual units at 1.1. I think part of that is for the ongoing operations, faced with the potential of any moving piece of equipment going down and needing to maintain that piece of equipment, and very difficult to replace. I believe that's one of the considerations why numerous pieces of equipment were selected. In this case, 9 1.1 megawatt gensets versus 1 larger genset. Believing also in part of the procurement process of understanding what was cost-effective available units, units that the company has had previous experience with at a previous crypto mining site in Nehill County, and getting some understanding on the runtime operations and the maintenance requirements of those units. Those were some of the economic reasons chosen for why the 1.1 megawatt units were the preferred choice.
As far as reliability, typically rotating equipment, the bigger your unit, the more reliable they are to run also. There's sites all over Alberta and Western Canada that have 1 unit that are running full oil fields, et cetera, with a 1 backup unit. So you can get more reliability out of them, but it's just a question.
Thank you for the question.
Mr. Stevens.
If I understand correctly, the noise assessment was all based on modeling. It's hypothetical at this point, and one of the conditions is real-time noise assessment once it's operational. So I think this ties in, and maybe the direction that Board Member Gender was going. Over how long of a period will we be doing our real-time assessment? Because if it's just a one-stop-in assessment, or if it's measure it for a week and then bring back that data, I'm just wondering how our condition is read and how that real-time noise assessment will be established.
Again, I'll leave it to.
Thank you again. This is Burak with patching. So to start with this study, where we started with the field work measuring the existing compressor site. And we measured it for 24 hours and excluded the non-facility related noise data. And with the result we found as the noise level at the monitoring location, we trued up our modeling, and we generally be over the measured value to be on the safe side. So we also calibrated our model accordingly. And as a standard best practice, once everything is up and running, there will be another field work to monitor the sound at the resident locations for a couple of days. And as per the regulations, we will determine a comprehensive sound level at the measuring location and true up our calculations again. And that will also include finding the representative time period as per the regulations, considering the wind data, wind speed and direction. That's how it will be approached after everything is, after past commissioning.
Did that answer your question, Mr. Seaman?
Yeah.
Can I clarify something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Mackenzie.
State your name again, sorry.
Yeah. Mackenzie Coons, Patching Associates, Data Validation Lead. As far as the future sound survey goes, we work under the AUC, so Alberta Utilities Commission, and AER Directive 38. They stipulate that we need at least 3 hours of downwind at all monitored locations. We find typically that takes about 7 days of monitoring, depending on distance and direction of the receivers, with the prevailing wind in Alberta being from the west. The monitoring locations here in the stipulation for the AUC was R01, which is to the southwest, if I'm not mistaken. So we would need a northeast wind. Not very common, but so in our typical experience, 7 to 10 days is usually long enough to capture that 3 hours of consecutive downwind. And that is required after we scrub out the non-facility noise. So one of our technical analysts will listen to all the recordings that we take during that time. They'll take out dog barks, cows mooing, rain, periods of excess wind, and then we require to have 3 hours of downwind from that clean data to analyze and then come up with a comprehensive sound level for this facility. It also requires the compressor station is running and that the cryptocurrency mining operation is in steady operation as well.
Mr. Stolberg and then Mr.
I actually have a couple of questions. My first question is there a known value of the assessment of this project? And also, I have observed on, I think it's along Highway 21, where there's a plant, and they got 2 large walls on 2 sides of the plant, which I'm assuming is some kind of a buffer for noise. And I was wondering if that, if noise should be an issue, if that be an option on something like this. Are those walls effective for curbing noise?
So 2 questions, 2 different things. So Craig, assessment one.
So yes, I believe the applicant indicated like the overall value, construction value assessment is around the $5 million mark. I don't believe that would represent, Mark may have to add in, that's probably the equipment for the containers, the generators themselves, not the construction value of moving into building the gravel pad per se.
And then from a technical side about the shielding, who would like to take that from? I'm not sure if you're familiar with the operation on Highway 21, but it's quite well known if you drive that road at all.
It's Burak again with patching. The experience we have with the noise walls or noise barriers, they are effective, but we also have to be careful with the reverberation effects as well. It could be an option and could be analyzed in a different model with the input and of course with the economical feasibility.
Mr. Clark again.
If I may add.
Oh, yeah.
As well. The benefit of Barack as well, Mark Lackey from Trimble. We had looked at a bunch of options as well, and Patching has been working with us very closely. What some of the experiences that I guess that have been shared with us is
with respect to sound walls, quite often the sound will travel upwards and then disperse. So what we understood, looking at potential options in all locations where we're placing these facilities, is the near environment within a very close proximity to the facility. There could be a reduction in sound, but as you step out further away from the facility, there's very minimal sound. But I don't know if you want to clarify that as well.
That's also correct. Thank you, Mark. So the further you go from the barriers, the effect of the noise barrier diminishes. That's what I think you wanted to clarify. Yeah.
Mr. Clark?
Hey, one thing about the wind, apparently it didn't listen to which way it should be blown from today, because it's certainly not from the west. It's cold southeast. But I just a question, when this is being built on Ember's lease and you have AUC approval, who is the license through? Is it through Ember or is it through Fire Technology? And who is at the end responsible to our individuals if this site is up and running? Who has to answer about noise? Who do we have to deal with from a government agency? And who do we have to get on the AUC and the AER for approving a project that possibly could be creating a big nuisance, to our residents in the area? Because this bothers me when we got these commingled leases like this. If it was off to the side in a separate lease that it was fire, that would be one thing. But when it's on an Ember lease, who's the person that answers?
So, and if I'm going to add a little bit to that one too, Mr. Clark, if I can, because to know where you're going, you need to know where you've been. And I think that's the biggest one. Unfortunately for your guys' demise, in this case, we have had too many times where we have these commingled and everybody starts pointing fingers at it's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault. And I am one that I'm getting very tired of dealing with that because I'm very much a stand-up guy that if there's a problem, I want to deal with it and I want one person to deal with. I don't want to be going to somebody else's. So this particular item is something that I want to have somebody's name that when, excuse my language, shit hits the fan and there's too much noise or there's too much garbage or there's too many complaints coming in, because what ends up happening, lovely to see all you gentlemen here, but I'm sure after you're done, you're going to go back to Calgary, you're going to go back to Edmonton, you're going to go back to your homes. We're going to be the ones holding it, and we're going to be getting the telephone calls saying this isn't happening the way you guys said it was going to happen. So as a responsible government, we have to look at this and say, who do we phone, get on the blower and say, fix this? So that's where we're at. That's what Mr. Clark is getting at. And that's what I would like to know. Who is the name that I call at 8 o'clock on July the 25th when somebody's pissed off because there's too much noise and they're trying to enjoy a barbecue with their family and they are just had enough? Who's the one person? Give me the name and give me the number.
Great question. Mark here again with Trimble. I'm going to answer the first part of that, and I'm going to maybe get Greg Baden of BCL Associates to clarify. One of the main reasons why we did select this spot was that we did have a good existing relationship with Ember on a previous project. And another was there was already, as we saw it, as an industrial operation already going on. And it's certainly in no means to escape any accountability. Where we can get in that confused situation where parties do point the finger at each other. The AUC permit is Fire Technologies. Any development permit that we achieve through this meeting and this approval process, our name will be on it. It'll be Fire Technology. So Fire Technology will be the accountable party, and we will provide you with the name of that accountable person and some backup people as well. And so we'll make sure that there's clear accountability for someone that's available 24/7 to take a call. We want this to go extremely well within the community, and we want to build a very good relationship with the community. So we know how these things can erode goodwill very quickly. And when no one's able to be reached or there's no responses, That erodes goodwill, and we don't want that to happen. So maybe I'll just turn it over to Greg very quickly just to talk about, just to clarify, Greg, I guess, the accountability on fire tech under the AUC and the development permit.
Yeah, I guess in terms of the,
Your name again, sir?
Greg,
We have other people watching, so.
Greg Baden. In terms of the AUC is similarly interested in, there are complaints with regard to the operation of the facility once it's, and there is a process to take complaints to the AUC. We can certainly lay that out for you if you're not aware of it.
In all due respect, I have zero confidence in the AUC. And again, what I said is if you know where you've been, you know where you're going. And I will say that to the head of the AUC that I don't think that's worth the paper that it's written on.
No, I understand that. I mean, I'm
Zero enforcement, so.
yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Greg. I'm just saying.
No, I understand that situation. And on our side, we try to follow the rules that are necessary to advance a project. And the AUC, that is their role.
Yes.
Follow that as it needed to be followed.
Yeah. Fair enough. Go ahead, Stevens, and then
Just if I could ask a question back to that location.
yeah, please.
And it might go back to Craig. We talked about what our assessment was. Who'd pay the taxes on this? Would it be Ember or would it be? And to me, that answers our question better than anything is who's paying the taxes on the lease. Because if it's Ember, the Ember should be sitting at the table here too. So that, I think I know the answer to it already, Craig, but.
Different parties, and unfortunately, Mr. Chair, I'm not really up on the taxation arrangements. However, I will again point out, taxes when it comes to a planning consideration is kind of low on the total.
I'm just saying for answering an accountability.
Actually, if I can, on the accountability question that did come up. So if faced with enforcement in this scenario, unfortunately, our mechanism probably would be get out the shotgun. And it means everyone who has a name attached to this is getting something from us, which is kind of how we dealt with our other AUC-related enforcement issue, and our disappointment in that past experience, more for Andrew than me, could be, was that AUC was the slower of the two to react.
Really?
But they lowered a pretty good hammer when the time finally came. So unfortunately, if you're the property owner for this, and you're asking me, Craig, how would you issue a stop order? It's our ability is to anyone involved in the infraction gets the notice. It's the applicant, that's the operator, that's the leasee, and it's a landlord. And unfortunately, if enforcement goes really, really bad, the person left holding the bag at the end is the landlord. That's the only one that we could start putting stuff onto a tax roll and actually going for foreclosure if it really comes down to it. So I think that puts a lot of pressure for the landowner as well. I'm not sure if they're here, unfortunately, to hear this message, to make sure that their leasees or subleasees all live up to their obligations, because our approval does run with the land. You're not scot-free just because someone else applied. You authorize that approval on your property. So that's the other perspective on, if things go really, really bad, what does an enforcement side look like?
Okay. Mr. Stevens.
2 points. The first one, to give the background, we had I can't even use the term applicant because that would imply they applied, who started a Bitcoin mining, installed a turbine, which is an entirely different realm when it comes to noise. Did not make an application to AUC or us, and enforcement was a nightmare. And this was a long, drawn-out process that resulted in very angry neighbors. So this is unfortunately who you're following, and that's why these questions are being asked, just to put it into perspective. The second comment is regarding the construction safety plan, traffic safety plan. a ton of knowledge with those. Notifications are all well and good, but lots of adjacent landowners will not see them or remember. It's another junk mail flyer that gets thrown out. So I would request that we require temporary signage to be placed when it's actually in use. Pretty standard. I have to get these approved by Alberta Transportation and other municipalities on a regular basis. It's not something that would come as a surprise.
Okay. Any other questions, Mr. Gender?
I guess what really gets me on some of these, like Mr. Nyberg had mentioned, okay, with the AUC, a couple of years ago, we had one farming operation that had applied for a lagoon, of which I had several major concerns on it, being that like with the water that it was going to be next to, it was built in one corner of it into a sandy location. We spoke about our concerns, but after that, it was more like the AU says that there's nothing that we can do here. We're going to okay it anyway. But my question is coming up to that. You said that there are states in here that there was a remotely piloted aircraft system that you went and took your decibel readings on. So this is the part that really bothers me. I don't know on what type of day, whether it's the topography, but there's 3 landowners within, say, 38 to 39 decibels of the 40 that is maximum. And I find it is such a close threshold that I'm very concerned about that.
And I think they've discussed the go forward on that, and I understand your concerns on it for sure. Go ahead, Mr.
Okay, couple more questions. One's on staffing, site office. I want to know how many staff's going to be there. And then other things through the noise studies with existing equipment stuff. One thing I couldn't help but note was the lack of maybe I won't say knowledge because that could be an insult, but filling out the sheets where it said unknown equipment, like there's nameplates on every piece of equipment. So that tells me that the study's done from a desk someplace, that you possibly weren't even at the site when you took the data down, because that data is all on nameplates. That data should be all in books within their site. And when we're comparing equipment, sometimes manufacturers do make a big difference on how their equipment runs and what kind of noise suppression you have to put on that equipment after it's been put in place. So it was just a note that I saw. But how many people are going to be there if you're going to have an office that size?
Mark with Trimble again. What we're estimating for staff on site with two to four carloads a week is probably about, a day is probably about 2 to 4 people a day. There's been discussions about when the operation is up and running about having a full-time security individual, because the shift work of the individuals that will predominantly be on site will be in and around that 7 to 8 a.m. right till about 5, 6, or 7 p.m. depending on workloads. So there's been also discussion around maybe having someone there permanently after the workers have left the site.
That answer your question?
That answers your question, yeah.
Okay. I've got a lot of questions still. On the power side, Craig, the AUC hearing, was there a notification sent out to all the adjacent landowners at the time? And were they given the proper ability to have their voice heard in this?
Mr. Chair, unfortunately, I'm going to have to give that one over to the applicant as well.
Okay.
Before he does that, I will point out
Were we notified?
We knew because the applicant had approached us. I'm confident in saying that the notices for the AUC process went out. But then the opportunity to have an AUC hearing seems to have been, just didn't happen.
So just repeat that again for me. The opportunity to have an AUC hearing just didn't happen.
Yeah, so okay. Went out and repairs may not have gotten back to the AUC to trigger the need for a hearing. But again, I'll ask the applicant to fill in the blanks on that part. So
I'm not sure again who's taking that one.
I'm going to put my money on Mark.
Greg to address a few things, and Ryan from Nextera will talk about the notifications that perhaps went out to the county and other
Sure.
So the AUC process, there is, had changed recently in the last 3 to 4 years. When you're dealing with smaller facilities, in this case, less than 10 megawatts, there is not a hearing. It is simply an internal review with the information that's provided to the AUC.
And megawatts we're using here, 9.1, I think.
9.9.
9.9.
So yes, it is the use of the rule.
Absolutely. Anybody that's run a truck out there knows where you register your truck. Okay.
Ryan Down, like Fairland. So notices went out via registered mail to everybody within 2 kilometers on March 18th and then June 19th, 2024. And the county was part of that process too.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay, from a security situation, I know this site fairly well. I think part of the security that goes with this site is the fact that it is less than ease of access. The road getting into it is a very interesting road, to say the least. From a security standpoint, you had mentioned, Mark, about having possibly a full-time security guard. Is there any plans and measures in place for security? And it's tough for you guys to deal with it, but it's the off-site stuff that sometimes people are driving around. Like, do you work with the community watch and anything that you have done? And this is more towards, and I don't think we can do it as a planning situation, but I think as a level of concern to work with your neighbors and be a good neighbor to help everybody get. And again, this gets back to my idea about who to call, right? So maybe good for you guys as well if that number that you say is 24/7 and the neighbor says, hey, there's a vehicle that's been driving around, it's casing your joint, maybe you guys would like to know as well. Is there something in play from a good neighbor policy that says communication goes both ways? And I don't.
No, thank you. Great question. We have not got into the details on what that would look like. We do view ourselves as a guest within the county, and we want to perform at the highest level of professionalism. We don't want to be a deterrent to anything happening in the county. This is something that we would be very much open to. If there's any county programs or any direction around how we can make those acquaintances and make sure that we're in communication with county residents, area landowners, we'd be more than happy to do that. We're hoping as well that, between fire tech personnel and Ember personnel, that there will be more of a presence in the area and hopefully more of a deterrent for crime. And if fire tech gets to the decision of, hiring a full-time individual when the daily workers leave, we think that'll be another significant deterrent for crime.
Okay. Thank you. Now, Craig, to you on this one. Typically, what we do is if a new development comes in, we ask them to upgrade the roads. And Andrew, can you move back to the pictures of the road just so that everybody's seeing what we're looking at? And I think by your own admission, Craig, you've said that this is not what we would call one of our most stellar roads. Is there anything in this that is going to either change the routing of where they're going or change the conditions of the road at the developer's expense?
Right, Master, in the report that I've submitted, other than signage and warning, no. So our assessment was, we do have the ability to ask people to upgrade roads to give access to their developments and sites. And I think that decision has to be weighed against the amount of additional traffic that's going on the road. So that's still an option. It would be called a development agreement condition. if the commission feels there's enough need to, say, physically modify county infrastructure to widen up that road surface back to a county standard of, say, 7 to 8 meters, 7.5 meters width. One of the challenges on this is what I can't confirm is whether or not we actually have the space to be able to do that and also meet our ditching requirements and how onerous it would be. But that's how the legislative layout, and again, it's linked to, do you have enough traffic impact to justify the increased expenditure in the infrastructure?
And I would respectfully agree with you that is, if there was, it also, the traffic impact also is determined on the condition of the road. If I have a dirt road, no traffic on it is going to what I would be considered suffice if I even put one road over or one vehicle over it. So I think they go in tandem, the condition of the road and the amount of traffic on that road. So there could be a condition put in place that there is some contribution to road improvement go forward, correct?
We can, yes.
Okay. And Mr. Stevens, there was another condition that somebody had over there. I just mentioned, just got it in my notes.
A clarification on their construction safety plan. It's already included in the recommendation, just that it be temporarily signed when construction is in use.
So if you can go back to figure number 2, Andrew, and it's the picture of where we're talking about the fire situation as well. Right there. So I would imagine you have a fire safety plan in place that you're going to go forward to. And this goes back to my upgrades of the road concern. If there is a major fire in this particular area, very, very heavily bushed area, we would be very hard pressed to get proper access to this area, considering the roads that we have and the terrain that we're dealing with there. Does your fire safety plan also take into the fact of the topography and the road condition? I'm not sure who's taking that one from you guys. Who looks after your fire safety plan? Okay, our emergency response plan. It could be, you're right, it could be somebody that has an accident then for the ambulance to get in as well.
On the existing site, Ember has an emergency response plan. We've talked to their vendor. We are going to have our own separate site-specific emergency response plan, which I believe has all those details. I don't have a copy of that right now. We have not fully commissioned that report. We wanted to see how the project progressed prior to getting an ERP, but we are committed with Ember to have an ERP. Fire Tech is committed as a company to have an ERP as well. All those details will be in that report, or that planning report. So sorry, I can't address that specifically.
No, that's fair. And those are of concerns that when that report does go out, I would hope that part of the road conditions are something that is put in. Okay, Mr. Stevens.
Something else we've consciously been doing on any large industrial developments lately is adding a condition of weed control up front. It's, yes, we have mechanisms after the fact, but it's a transparency thing on our expectations before it starts. So I think that would be pertinent as well.
Point, you got that, Craig? Okay. So at this point, I'd like to know if there's anything from the landowners. We have a number of adjacent landowners here, and I would definitely like the board to hear from anybody that would like to speak to that. So just come to the mic and state your name.
Yeah, my name is Fred Van Skyver. I'm RO1. Like I say, I have a couple concerns. Like I said, thank you guys. You do an excellent job for asking the questions. the noise, like we're close to that same decimal. Are you guys coming back in like 2 months after or 3 months after? Because like I say, there's times at Ember Well that, yeah, we can hardly sit outside. The wind's blowing the right way. Most times we don't hear prevailing wind, but we're close. I can see the Ember plant from my place. So it'd be nice to know what they're gonna come back later on and do it, and whether or not you put the walls up to keep the noise out. Like we live out there for a reason. It's not to listen to a big well. Yeah, and the crime is an issue. Like I said, like these days, everything's being broken into. Like I say, as a landowner now, with the putting this here, do I have to put a gate at the end of my driveway now and start locking it every time I leave home? It does concern me because, like I said, we've been on oil sites hauling oil and stuff where everything's being stolen, ground cables, everything. This is, like I said, quite a jewel there for a lot of thieves. So hopefully they can do something. And for gosh sakes, visit the damn road. Like I said, Ember should be embarrassed by the end of the road where it goes into their lease. And anybody that hasn't seen it, go up there when it rains or even right now. And we do use the back road from Ember's lease to get to our place. And it is a complete shame. In fact, I plow it myself because, and like I said, we've been around and you guys were too. We've dealt with Trident and stuff. The ones that were here today, gone tomorrow. So hopefully, like I said, and as for fire tech, hey guys, I phoned you guys. I come out more confused afterwards because you answered absolutely nothing of my concerns. You knew nothing about the site, nothing was going on. Like I said, it wasn't until later on when people were saying Bitcoin and all this, the rest of us going, what the hell? We don't know what's going on, So, and as one of the nearer ones that's going to have to listen to this noise, deal with the extra traffic, because my wife travels twice a day back on that road. Mr. Heemster does the same. They lives right on that road. It's not the best road. Okay, thank you kindly.
Mr. Heemstra, Ms. Rule.
Lori Rule. I'm one of the owners of the RO3 site. And one of the things that was in my comments that I don't think has been addressed is this issue of the low frequency noise levels and how that can actually impact how much the decibel levels affect the human perception of that sound. So in the report itself, page 3 and page 16, the engineering firm has indicated that those LFN noise levels can't actually be accurately estimated. So they weren't taken into account in the noise impact assessment report. I think there were some estimates done. If you look on the table on page 2 of the executive summary of the noise impact assessment, one thing that I didn't understand is how the LFN levels can be lower after the proposed development is installed. And then the other thing that the reason why these LFN levels are so important is because if the LFN levels are greater than 20 decibels, which according to the report already exists at one of the RO3 locations, then there should be a 5 dBA penalty assessed on the actual decibel levels. And in that case, your permissible sound levels would be over the 40 decibels in each of the receiver sites, including the residences. So that's why this issue of our concerns about the accuracy of the modeling, the assumptions, the information that was provided by the applicant, all of the numbers on this noise impact assessment are reliant on all of these factors that they're just guesses. I mean, probably really educated guesses, but none of you can guarantee that the results that you're giving us in these tables are actually going to reflect reality once that development is in place. And we're hearing from the counselors how enforcement is not straightforward. And so I just think the Municipal Planning Commission really has to consider requiring some of this stuff up front, not waiting for the after monitoring, not waiting for the 5-year renewal, but there have to be effective noise mitigation measures that can be part of the development permit, where we are giving ourselves that extra protection just in case things don't happen in the real world like we're hoping in the assessment. Because, like my neighbor indicated, we live out there because of the peace and quiet, and we've already been burned by so many oil and gas broken promises. And when I have people come out to stay at my place, that's one of the first things they say. It's so quiet out here. And maybe when you live in the city, you don't realize what a gift that is. And once it's gone, and those generators will be running continuously. So that's why I just really wanted to appeal to our commission. This is a discretionary use. I get the complication with the power generating aspect of things, but you're not going to have that power generation and if there's no Bitcoin operation. So really, the conditions on the Bitcoin operation side of things, they have to address that noise impact. And the one question that I had for the commission, I was just wondering if there are any other actually approved data processing developments in the county.
There has been two now? Two, I think two.
Okay.
One approved, one still, yeah.
Okay. Just for the commission to consider, when we're making some of these initial approvals for sort of newer types of developments, we're really thinking about setting a precedent for future applications. And, you know, maybe we can set the bar a little bit higher than the minimum requirements of the AUC.
So the one nice thing about the commission is we don't set a precedent where everyone is definitely dealt on their own merits.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where we try to do that. So I understand where you're coming from 100%, but yes, we try to look at every development on its merits alone, not on what's been or maybe. So, but I definitely agree with you. So, is there anything else, Mr. Rowe?
Okay, just on the one, I think the approval's like going through, or we had voted on our last meeting, but it was postponed for the fact of resident notification and the biggest issue was noise. So it's very known by our MPC board that noise is a big concern, and peace and quiet and nuisance noises to our residents are of utmost importance too. So
thank you for that, Mr. Heemstra.
Kevin Heemstra is my name. I live on Township Road 37-0. So our property and the Dolan's property will be the ones that will receive 99% of the traffic. I'd love to send them down Fred's Road, but if you traveled Fred's Road, you probably wouldn't go that route. I mean, you talk about the poor quality of the road, but one thing the county missed is the picture of the hill between my two driveways. You can't see what's coming on the other side and vice versa, right? And that's an 80-kilometer-an-hour passable road. Many, many times we meet people, we've got to get to the edge to be safe, right? And with all this traffic that's going to come, we are very concerned about our safety on the road. That needs to be addressed. You know, we talk about security, we talk about being good neighbors. Well, come to us with a plan that how you're going to help us retain our security that we have today. Because this is a $5 million operation. There's how many computers per site or per box, right? There's valuable equipment. And I know there's been historical issues with crime in rural areas when these sites move in. Right, so come to us and say, okay, we're going to help you with security. We're going to put gates up. We're going to put cameras up. We're going to ensure that you maintain your security, be comfortable, and we're good stewards of the community. We're not just there for what's Bitcoin worth today. What's the number? Yeah, a lot of money. Cost you 40 grand to put in security to 3 neighbors, make us all happy. Think about the little things. And the road with the hill, it's got to be fixed. We're going to have a wreck. And unfortunately, it's my family that travels that road. That's all I've got to add. The noise thing has been well discussed, so.
Thank you for that. So from the developer side, you've heard anything that you'd like to make comment? I would imagine that it would be Mark.
Would you like me to address some of the questions or?
Yeah, absolutely. That's your opportunity. Yeah. We try to be fair.
Thank you very much. I may call on some of my colleagues here as well. Yeah, on the matter of security, fortunately, we're seeing increased crime throughout rural Alberta. We're seeing more crime in the centers. Crime. I guess when we looked at this project area and wanting to put it on an existing industrial site, we thought that would be a bit of a mitigator of crime and not so much of a something that was going to attract more individuals into the area to look for opportunities. As I said in the past, we've worked well with Ember in the past. They do have existing lighting, security cameras, controlled access into the site, fencing. Any development that we'll be doing on that existing site will only be adding to the security of the site with additional fencing, additional cameras, more people there on a daily basis. Again, our estimate of traffic on an ongoing operation is 2 to 4 vehicles a day. We're not expecting even that to be big vehicles. During construction, a lot of these modular units will be brought in on flatbeds, so there will be larger trucks on the roads at that time. We're certainly more than happy to honor the road use agreements, signage. We will ensure all contractors are aware of this. There will be briefing, safety meetings, make sure that they're honoring all the stipulations under the road use agreements. As I said, there will be a later decision coming based on the approval of the project if fire retains security on site full time for when the workers go home on a daily basis. We're hoping that our presence there is not going to bring more crime to the community, but again, hoping that some of the mitigations that we put in place will deter individuals coming in. My understanding with respect to the road, we have been on site. We've traveled carefully on that road. We understand Ember and others have operations in the area. I can't speak to their safety record or how they performed as a good steward. Again, we will honor all road use conditions. If there's any damage to the road, obviously the road use agreement covers off on that. We will be held accountable for that. I guess I'll jump back to noise again a little bit here. Again, we had looked at other mitigations. We've done 2, I guess, noise impact assessments under the AUC requirements between the noise impact assessments, the environmental impact assessment, and the emissions assessment. Only one of those reports is actually required for something of this size. We wanted to ensure that we went over and above and fully understood the project and what implications there could be on the local environment. So that's why the environmental report was done and the air emissions report as well. I think those reports are fairly conclusive. There's a lot of good information in there. I guess I would draw back to the conclusion of most of those reports that there's, nominal to low impact within the local environment. And our hope was, again, that choosing a site that already had ongoing industrial operations was hopefully a better option than coming in and disturbing a piece of, an area that certainly hadn't had any disturbance at that point in time. I'll let patching talk to the accuracy of the modeling, maybe, and low frequency noise in a second, but it's my understanding, and Barak, hopefully you can confirm this, but looking at the modeling assumptions, my understanding is it's close to worst case assumptions. So maybe you might want to talk about that a little bit when you address low frequency noise. We had asked the questions as well. That's great to have modeling and theoretics done, but what's real life look like? So, it's part of an AUC requirement, and certainly I've seen it as a condition of the development permit that once the operations are up and running, that actual readings will take place. And if there's any mitigations required beyond there to meet the requirements, those mitigations will happen. Maybe I'll turn it over to Mac or Barak just to talk about low frequency noise and maybe some of the other questions that I haven't addressed here. And accuracy of the modeling.
Thank you, Mark, and everyone for raising your concerns. It's a little hard to learn and explain this stuff, but I'll try to be through, but not overwhelming, but let me know if you need more elaboration. So we've been working for the noise assessment on this site and study since May, and we made 3 revisions with updating data and assumptions. And the last revision considered the closer potential developments, and the revision before that provided mitigations, considering that potential development, and now the fire tech decided to go with the lower noise rating generators as a mitigation plan. So they cut down the noise levels to 37 and below, which I think was previously misstated in this meeting as being above 39. So 37 and below gives us quite a good margin. Regarding the low frequency noise, so I would like to state that as a beginning, this column, the DBC minus DBA values on the table, is for a flag, for flagging that there might be a potential, estimates as a potential. Being over 20, the difference, DBC minus DBA difference is a potential for a low frequency noise, but it should be coming from the measured location, measurements, comprehensive sound survey. So this is just a flag for us and a flag for fire tech that should be kept in mind. And once everything's up and running after the post-commissioning, as AOC also approved the application as a prerequisite, there should be a noise survey, comprehensive sound survey after everything's up and running. So that will be assessed, only assessed by then. The reason why DBC minus DBA differences got below compared to the existing site is DBC and DBA are both increased, but DBA increased more, so the difference become lower. Simply to say that. Other than that, I think that answers all the. Do you want to add anything, Mike?
I think we have a question from Board Member Stevens.
I'm not sure if this is best answered by staff or the noise assessment professionals, but we have involvement because this falls into our realm as a data processing, but we do not have any involvement if this site were to expand on conventional oil and gas, if they added a compressor to this site. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
So I guess my question is, since noise is cumulative and we can use this as a factor now, is there any way that we get a seat at the table if the conventional oil and gas side goes to make an addition on something that is strictly between them and AER? My fear is, okay, we do real-time modeling, this is commissioned, playing devil's advocate, and it falls within that 40 decibel threshold, and that's now allowable. But Amber, the partner, decides that they're going to expand. Do they include the noise provided by the data processing before they are allowed to expand? Because to the best of my knowledge, we have no say in any way, shape, or form if that were to happen.
Maybe I can add a little, Mr. Chairman. I think I understand the nature of the question. Is when you pick apart the study, it seems like the obligation under the, I'm going to get the directive number wrong, 038, is to only look at AER regulated facilities. And the data processing would not be AER. So the question is, at the subsequent point, when they do another study, would they do exactly that? They would look at only AER items and not the items that were also local, even though all the space for allowable noise has already been taken up. So they've done more work under Directive 038 than I have. So I'll maybe hand the torch to them to answer from that point. Would you do that? That's how it would go down?
Mackenzie with patching. We've had a relationship with Fire Tech for a while. We work with both AUC and AER all the time. When we do our cumulative assessments, we don't work with Ember specifically too much. We've worked with them a couple of times in the past. If they were to do the best practices assessment, they would take into account both the AER and the AUC cumulative impacts, regardless, especially since that AUC, if they contacted us for this assessment, we would heavily advise them not to ignore the AUC, especially since it's on their lease. And the noise impacts of the generators and Bitcoin miners should definitely be taken into account for an cumulative impact. And then Ember, if they were to expand, they would still have to comply with the 40 decibel PSL under the AER directive. With our current predicted sound levels of 37, there's a little bit of room there to expand, but not significant.
A little bit more.
I'm going to go ahead. Then you go ahead. Question.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Craig, and then I'll ask.
Yes. So my thoughts on the question, the explanation from the general practice would be waiting after 5 years, then it's a complete evaluation on our terms of the noise for data processing. And if some other use has taken up the space, the same standard we're looking for, then you could probably guess how that evaluation is going to go.
Fair enough. Yeah, that answers the question.
And I just have a quick question. And so if the AUC application would have been for, let's say, 11 megawatts or 12 megawatts, whatever, however that puts it over the 9.9, 10, would the noise mitigation thresholds be changed if it was a larger megawatts facility, same decibel ratings at the R1s, 2s, and 3s, whatever, would be the same? Okay. And to Ms. Rule's question about the mitigation of the low frequency adding points, and I think she said it was a 0.5 penalty. Can you just comment on that a little bit? I don't know if it was answered as quite as well as.
It was 5.
5, okay.
Yeah. Mackenzie with Patching Associates again. Both AER and the AUC have a provision for low frequency noise penalties. It requires two things, both a DBC minus dBA level over 20 and a clearly identifiable tone. Both regulations have a slightly different definition of what a tone is, but as a base level, it's breaking down the sound into third octave bands. And then the central tone has to be 5 decibels or more over the adjacent tone, and then 10 decibels or more over 2 bands over. So if it's a tone at 31 hertz, you need to be 5 decibels over at 25, and then 10 decibels over at, putting myself in my octave math here, 50 decibels to be identified as a tone. And they don't accept modeled levels. To be clear, our report models the predicted DVC minus dBA. Both regulations will only accept a measured level at that receiver, and that's using clean data. So that's after scrubbing out wind, because the most common contaminant of a DVC minus dBA is wind contamination. It's very, very prevalent at 25 hertz band. And part of the reason our report predicted a DVC minus dBA over 20 for the existing was doing recon. So during recon, our field analysts drive around and take measurements of the adjacent leases. We don't have access to those leases because we don't have a safety permit. So we take them from lease roads and public roads. So we take them from distances of a couple hundred meters. And the most common contaminant in those measurements is wind as well. So we do end up with a predominantly DVC heavy measurement for those facilities, but we put them in the model to come up with the cumulative impacts that both regulations require.
Okay, very good. Does that answer your question, Ms. Rowe?
Well, I guess not really.
It is a modeling, and unfortunately, I understand this noise one always sticks with me because we are doing modeling, but it's a chicken and egg. We don't know they can't build a facility if they don't know what they're going to have. They do their best estimate, and that is why I guess we will have the opportunity to put conditions on to say that if you don't meet those and something that has been unpredicted happens, i.e. one of the pieces of equipment is making too much noise, then they will have to fix that. So, and I think that is within our realm of making the decision that we have to make. So, thank you for that. Okay. No, you guys. Okay, I'm going to go with Mr. Gender.
Change your heart. Okay, is this an active site at the moment? Is there a compressor or any piece of equipment running there at the moment?
Yes, there is.
So it would be creating some decibels also. So added onto the threshold. You'd possibly be over. I'm just throwing out there. I'm just assuming. So like I'm just kind of wondering. Okay, like in order to feed these 9 compartments now, is there going to be feedstock that is going to be requiring this compressor to feedstock to you, or is it just suction on the line?
That's an Ember question, but maybe you
It is. Maybe I'll just address it generally. Yeah, our understanding is it's an ongoing operation. Gas is going through the facility, being compressed, put on the sales line. Okay, we will be taking a portion of that gas at the outlet of the facility, and that'll be a short tie-in into a header system which will feed the individual generators. In the detailed information in the report as well, because it is an existing facility, Patching has been able to run numbers on what the existing current state is and what the predicted state will be with fire tech's equipment in full operation. And I understand in the report that, the decibel levels of Ember's existing operations were under the threshold. And I think that was potentially maybe one of the questions. So did that answer your question? Or?
Okay, under the threshold of the 40 with a combination of the two of them?
Correct. Yes. You probably have the exact schedule. Maybe you can let them know.
Yes, correct. And also other existing facilities within the study area. As you can see on the map, there are some other Ember facilities that we identified during the recon, and we got some sound measurements through them. So the cumulatives you see on the table as under the existing case includes all the energy facilities within the study area.
Thank you.
Thank you, Clark.
Okay, we've been discussing AER directives, and I've been sitting through a bunch of meetings in Calgary with on called mature asset strategy, and Ember's been at the table quite a bit on those meetings. Also, if we want to talk directives, Directive 67 and 88 are being challenged by the RMA, which is Rural Municipal Association, and it's all the municipalities in Alberta. And that is wordage in the AER on may and being changed to shall. So we've got our policy people writing that into the AER, and it'll be in front of the AER. So some of the rules when it comes to further licensing of these sites, just what we're talking about, could be affected by these other directives. So it's just a directive is a directive. A directive is to be challenged as we get new things coming in. So, but at forefront, we do have RMA working on that right now too. So because there is so many different types of operations they're trying to put onto these mature sites to sell basically dry shallow gas. So, and Ember is one of the big players on it. So just to bring that to the table too.
Okay. Mr. Stevens. I was just looking for confirmation. The nature of these, lots of these gas sites is they sort of ramp up and down depending on the nature of natural gas prices. When you guys did your existing monitoring, were both compressors operating or not? I believe it would be K220 and K280 is what they're referred to in your noise study.
Yeah, it's Burak again with patching. So when we did our measurements, both compressors were running. And also you can see on table 4A of the report, the source order ranking, that the most dominant sources from the existing facility, you can clearly see K220 and K280 sources there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Does it issue load? Like were they operating at an idle or were they operating full load?
We measured as existing. Let me confirm.
Because there is quite a difference in noise on a unit if it's running just for noise survey or running under full load.
So the operating horsepower and RPM are on table B1 of the adjacent facility equipment details. And we have 24 hours of measurement, 300 meters north of the facility. Yeah, we calibrated our model with the measurement we have there.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Any comments from the landholders or landowners or the applicant?
James?
Yes, go ahead.
Everything you talked about was security, right?
Just come to the mic, Mr. Heemstra, please.
You
talk about security, and at the start of the meeting, you said you were going to consider to put somebody there, full-time security. Halfway through it, you said you would have somebody. So what is the answer on security? You're going to have somebody there or not?
Sorry if there was any confusion on my part. Fire will be making a decision of whether they will have security. It's one of the things that they are considering. If I'm to speak out of turn, I would imagine they will go that direction, but I can't definitively say that. The company needs to make that call.
So then the answer is no to start.
Right today, it's no.
Okay. Any other questions? So, as we were told earlier, or informed, not told, I guess, we have the opportunity to deliberate this in, MPC has the opportunity to deliberate in closed chambers. So what is your thoughts on that as a board? Would you like to have a discussion in closed chambers just to flesh this out? Then I would take a motion from you, Mr. Gender, to move into camera. All those in favor? And opposed? I have one opposed, which is Mr. Stevens.